In this video, I'll show you how I made a Star Trek away team jacket. I tried to find a recent pattern for a man's jacket but couldn't find any, so I found an old one I had on hand from 1986. Finding the mesh was rather difficult. These laundry bags worked out very well. I tried dyeing the mesh fabric, but polyester doesn't take to dye very well. Spray paint worked best. Slate gray is shown here, but I also found the same brand of brilliant blue worked really well. I used Photoshop CS5 to lay out the jacket and then traced over the shapes to get my pattern pieces. Take away the jacket and I've got my pattern. Here we're looking at the sleeve. I've already cut out the mesh fabric and now I'm laying out the armband using butcher paper. I wanted to give the prominent portions of the jacket a suede look. So here I've laid out my front panel, armband, and back panels using a polyester suede cloth. To make the piping, I used a narrow nylon cord that I found from the home improvement store. The fabric is a pleather type of fabric. It's very thin and flexible and looks like patent leather. It's kind of stretchy and has a shiny side to it. Cut your fabric about 1.5 inches wide and use a zipper foot to get tighter seams. Lay your cord down the center of the fabric, fold it over in half, and then the presser foot will press right up against the edge of that cord to give you a very tight seam. You'll want to do a lot of this. I bought 2 packages of cording and you'll have about 100 feet of piping by the time you're all done. Next, we're going to make the quilted ribbed fabric that you see on the front and back panels. You'll want to use a cotton polyester type fabric and a thin cotton batting. Lay your panels on top of your batting and place your stitches about 3/4 inch apart. You'll sew one length, turn your needle, stitch a few stitches, put your needle down, turn your fabric, and then stitch again about 3/4 inch apart. And you can see you get a nice quilted look when you're done. The various shapes on the jacket are actually patches or appliques. Around each one is piping. Here we're going to show you how to sew your piping directly onto the edge. Place your piping on the edge of your shape and sew about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch from the edge. When you turn it over, you'll notice how the piping gives you a nice finished look to the individual patches. Here I'll show you how to lay out your various shapes and sew them down to the jacket. The jacket has a solid base fabric and all the shapes are individual appliques that go on top. You'll notice there are several points and places where various types of fabrics come together. You'll need to study the screenshots from the film to really understand how the various shapes go on in a particular order. Here on the actual jacket, you see how I've got everything laid out. Now underneath all of this is a solid piece of fabric. At this location, our piping is raw and rough on the back side, but when we turn it back over and we get ready to stitch it down, it looks nice and neat. Now we're going to sew our individual appliques to the base fabric. Make sure everything's tucked under neatly and sew right in the ditch between the piping and the fabric. Now we have all of our appliques added to our primary jacket pieces. Here's the back, this is the front of the jacket, and here is the sleeve. This jacket has a very structured look, and it gets that from the shoulder pads. The shoulder pads are like a wedge, and I'll show you how to put it together. I start with a round piece of batting, and to that I add a smaller piece of batting and I sew those together right down the middle. You may add additional layers of batting if you'd like thicker shoulder pads. We fold the shoulder pad in half, and then you can see how I've got it laid out. On the left hand side is the thicker edge where your shoulder would be, And the thinner edge is where the person's neck would be. Before attaching this to the jacket, cover it with blue fabric and stitch around the edges. Next, we're going to make the metallic appliques that you see like this on the front and rear of the jacket. I used fun foam. Make sure it's a thick type. I cut out my various shapes. I painted them with a basic gray paint. Then I top coated them with a metallic paint. To make the impressions in the metallic buttons, I removed an eraser from a pencil, pressed very hard to make the impression, then used the point of the pencil to make the center of the button. This is how the final jacket turned out. The metallic buttons are located at key places on the jacket. The sleeve has a very tight wrist. It's a very short fitted jacket, and the emblem was 3D printed by my son. This project contains a lot of detail, but if you have a moderate level of sewing skill, you should be able to complete it successfully.